Hello, I'm Meena Pittman, and this is my reflection video for the collage we made in my design and thinking class. So, we started with lookbook 3, and you'll notice these little collages on my title pages. I included those to just show more of my process, because they were little collages that didn't quite make it to the final, and I just liked how they looked. The first thing we did was research past collage artists. We researched 3 different artists. The goal was to see how they used the collage format to convey meaning. And this led to ideation, where we were to make a list of action adjectives from our historical collage artists. Through the Bodhi campaign, Hannah Hawke's work, and the film Hausu, I felt like their collages evoked the unnatural and the surreal, and my adjectives stemmed from that. I went with uncanny as my jumping off point for my mind map. With mind maps, you want to use your base word to think of 3 other words, and then each of those 3 words, you want to come up with 3 words that stem off of that. And as you go into the later tiers, you want words that have specific images you can use, or words that you can convey through design principles. And with my projects for this class, I had fun by making a theme for each of my projects, or inspired by a specific artist. Like for my project 2, I made my presentation Stanley Kubrick themed. And so, when I think of surreal art, my mind immediately jumps to David Lynch. So a lot of my mind map stemmed from his work. For distortion, I was able to think of specific images, but I was also able to think of ways I could use the design principles to convey distortion. With proportion, for example, I could make things smaller or bigger than they're supposed to be. Or with placement, I could make things tilted or upside down. I had a lot of fun with the idea of contra naturam, which basically means something that goes against nature. I went on this thought path of the idea of anthropomorphic beings, which would become a central point of my collage. I wanted to present animals and humans in a way that was almost right, but not quite. My thesis was, with the advancements of AI, the line between reality and fiction is blurred, making it harder to tell what's real. Information and misinformation fuel this confusion, with recent events exemplifying how difficult it is to know the truth. Society, like herded animals, is pushed and shaped by hidden forces. In this environment, life feels like a staged performance, with true motives kept out of sight. These were my compositional inspiration pieces. I knew I wanted to convey my theme with surreal dreamscapes, and I wanted to use my images to show that idea of concealment. I wanted to include a curtain or a spotlight, anthropomorphic people, stripes, and the woods. So I made my first set of thumbnails. This brings me into something I would have done differently looking back. To me, it was hard to visualize what to sketch without base images. It made more sense to me to find filler images to use in the thumbnails to get my point across, and then once my value comps were figured out, I'd then find the images I actually wanted to use with the correct values. Although this method made sense for me, I think I would have made the assignment easier and not as hard in the long run if I had done the sketching method. After our first set of thumbnails, we received feedback and then made our second set of thumbnails. For, how do I do this? That one right there. I liked the idea of this collage. I think it went well with my thesis, and it was fun. It's just a fun idea, the little faces on the sheep, but it didn't have great movement. It seems like the comp is very split down the middle for this concept on this side and this concept on this side. So I needed to work on movement with that one. With this one, there was better movement. The focal point is a little more clear with the ray pointing towards the deer man, but it was a little bit boring. So we talked about maybe tilting with, like, creating this atmosphere of distortion and things not quite right. We talked about maybe tilting the trees a couple different ways, tilting the deer man a little bit more, just to give that idea. And then we also talked about that with the twins' toes touching the bottom, and the rays touching the bottom, they closed in the composition. If I added a little bit more of a border, then the movement would be better. We also talked about adding a little bit of a background behind the deer man to add more value and to get the value to keep moving us towards the focal point. And then in my first set of comps with the rays, I had all the rays in, they all stopped at the same place. So for this thumbnail, I varied the ray lengths. That's kind of the same for the one down there. I just played with adding, darkening that spotlight behind them and then adding the owl shape. We thought that this one had better movement, so it's just kind of a variation. With this one, I also liked the idea of how it would fit into my thesis, but the window he's kind of crawling out of was pretty centered, and the sheep create a nice movement. The movement to what? Like the face isn't the focal point, but that's kind of what becomes the focal point with the sheep jumping there. And so with that thumbnail, I would need to play around with that if I wanted to use it. I made adjustments to my top 2 concepts, and I did value sets for each one to kind of flesh out which one would be the better option. In the end, I decided that this one worked best, and it had the most going for it, movement and placement-wise. This was the finalized version of my value comp, and so then it was time to start collaging. The collaging part of this project was for our portfolio 4. So, for my first try, I read the instructions wrong. I thought the collage was due with lookbook 3, not portfolio 4, so I haphazardly made a collage, and I hated it. In a way, it was good that I still made this collage, even though I didn't like it, because it showed me what not to do. So I realized some mistakes, like the tree placement around the comp kind of closed it in, and then I didn't think the values created interesting movement. There was no focal point in any sort of way. And I also realized I needed more image variation. It was too close to my value compositions. And when I constructed this collage, it was too small, so it felt like my image quality wasn't very good, and it narrowed down how much I could play with the placement. With what not to do out of the way, I could begin the collage process. And so we started with the background images, the bigger background images, and we worked our way towards the smaller, closer images. This was my first go of the background, and after I submitted this, we went over in class about how black and white are the easiest and most common values, and subsequently, they're the less interesting, more boring values. As you can see, my background is primarily solid black, and it covered a lot of the surface area, which made it kind of boring, and I would need to change that as well as the rays, because those are just solid white, if I wanted a more interesting comp with better movement. So for my next submission, I changed the background from black to a dark gray, and I changed the rays from white to light gray. I then played around with the contrast of the conjoined twins. I showed a lighter version and a darker version. I also showed the 2 different concepts, the concept of the deer head splitting open to reveal the human face, and then with that one over there, the idea of the holding the human sheep. And so in class, we went over the idea of maybe merging those 2 concepts, as well as adding tonal gradation to the background and the rays. The suit also would need some value variation, as I was reading as flat, so I want to add some of that. So I reworked my background. I made the background that image of the curtains, and then I made the circle a ombre. And this is my final collage. So I added the tonal gradation to the stripes, as well as adding value variation to the suit. I added more trees pointing up to complement the trees pointing down, as well as the microphone, and I inverted the colors on the deer man's face. Overall, I think my movement works well. Like, your eye starts with the rays on the left, and your eyes are then pulled up past the conjoined twins, and then up into the deer man's face, and then they're pulled back into the hands holding the human sheep. And the direction of the trees help to also create the focal point. If I could change something, I'd make the floral shape on the bottom a little lighter, and I'd make the ombre of the circle have more white, just so there'd be a little bit of white peeking behind the deer head. Lastly, these were the alignments used in my collage. This project was a great example of how to use the design thinking method. Design thinking is crucial for my major. In fashion design or apparel construction, I think it would be impossible not to go through the design thinking process. Like in this class, designers have to gather inspiration, create mood boards and sketches, and from there you have to make many prototypes to flesh out your idea and test out the pattern, and then again for fit and analysis. I haven't worked with a manufacturer yet in my career, but I know for the most part brands work with manufacturers overseas, and it's common to make at least 3 samples and they go back and forth before the final. I know that when I design for shows, I make at least 1 prototype, often 2, and then I'm making alterations up until the day of the show. I've thought something was done only to find out it wasn't quite right, and then just had to start completely over. So, in conclusion, pattern design and construction involve many variables, so I'll need to be flexible and open to finding a new solution if my first idea doesn't work.